I'm going to share with you what I believe to be the king of strength exercises for athletes. Let's get into it. Yo, what's going on, guys? Chris Bonner from Overtime Athletes, and what I want to be able to do with you today is share what I believe to be the king of strength movements for athletes. Now, this is going to be one of those borderline controversial videos, but I want to kind of explain some of the findings as I evolve as a coach to be able to support you in becoming better, whether you're a coach helping your athlete or an actual athlete. So getting right into it, what I'm essentially comparing this to is what is believed to be the king, which is going to be the squat or some variation of the deadlift, right? The squat mostly being the back squat, and the deadlift, usually what I've always considered to be is the trap bar deadlift, which I still love the back squat, but when we're actually talking standard of athlete and trying to get them to overall increase through a stimulus, I believe that the walking lunge, yes, the most basic vanilla movement that we've forgotten because we throw all these fancy things in, I believe that the walking lunge is superior to both of them, and let me explain why. Now, number one, we have to address the actual movement, right? If we're working through a trap bar deadlift or a back squat, we can see that we are decelerating through hip flexion, and then we are extending through hip extension, working the hips, right? Now, this is a basic pattern that we commonly use on the field or court to be able to jump, sprint, things of that nature. Now, the walking lunge, if we look at that same movement, as an athlete steps forward, they are going through hip flexion, and then as they pull through, they are pulling through to hip extension. Now, it's the exact same movement. Now, why do I like this from a movement basis more than, say, the back squat and the trap bar deadlift? Back squat and trap bar deadlift, the athlete is working just fighting gravitational forces, lifting vertically through the ground. When you actually add a walking lunge and the athlete steps through, they actually have to pull their hip through that hip extension and then get into their next sequence of movement, which not just fighting vertical forces, but also those horizontal forces to pull the hip through, which mimics how we as humans in our actual gait when we go to sprint or walk, which we predominantly see on the field and court. Number two, let's actually break down the actual benefits. So number one, when we perform a unilateral movement compared to a bilateral movement, we can actually enhance or increase our ability to eliminate strength imbalances. As athletes, we tend to prefer one leg over the other when we're sprinting, cutting, changing direction, things of that nature. And we can bring both of those legs up to symmetry and up to balance when we train them unilaterally. The second benefit is we can simply increase and promote stability through the instability of the walking lunge. Anytime that an athlete needs to step forward, they are creating instability because now a load and resistance is basically diverted to that single leg. So as the athlete has to basically create that motion of stepping forward or falling forward, basically that creates a level of instability, which in turn promotes stability of the actual athlete. And then finally, by performing unilateral exercises, we can go through a greater peak range of motion. So anytime we're doing a single leg movement, we can get through a deeper range of motion with that actual athlete. So what I'm saying is when they're performing a walking lunge, typically the athlete's hip, knee, and ankle joint is going through a greater range of motion when they perform that walking lunge versus a trap bar and an actual squat. Number three is going to be total muscle activation. Now, there's two studies that have come out that I'll link down below, but both of these have basically compared a back squat versus a walking lunge and the total amount of musculature that was recruited through those movements, and both of them have shown that the walking lunge recruits more muscle. And what does this mean? It means that when I'm performing a walking lunge as a coach, or I'm administering it, or if I'm an athlete performing it, I can essentially recruit more of those muscles through one singular movement than another, and that's essentially the back squat. So I can tackle more of those muscles that we're going to utilize when we're sprinting, running, and jumping. Now, number four benefit is one of the keys to this whole deal. It comes down to the actual load and intensity and applying the stimulus to the actual athlete to get a greater stimulus and a greater stress. What does that mean, right? So let's get into it. So when it comes to actually loading the athlete with a movement, Alex Natura has done a great job, which I'll link down below, where he has essentially came out with an equation that compares the back squat to a single leg split squat. So what he determined was if an athlete, take a 200-pound athlete, were to perform a back squat with 200 pounds, their body weight on their back, that would be the equivalent to an athlete performing a single leg split squat with just their body weight. No load, no intensity, no resistance, it would be the equivalent. So if you actually think about that, I can actually safely, without compromising, load an athlete with a single leg far greater, get a far greater stimulus, right, with that muscle activation, than I would be that if I'm performing a back squat. And the other thing when it comes down to the intensity, the reason why I love it is because I work with athletes from youth up to the professional level. When it comes time to load an athlete at the youth level, I can perform a walking lunge with dumbbells and get a greater stimulus, or with just their body weight. Or if I'm working with a professional athlete, I don't need to load them up with 400 or 500 pounds on their spine, and I can not compromise them in any way, shape, or form, and I can actually perform a single leg movement like a walking lunge and get that same stimulus. So there you have it, guys. The reason why I believe that the back squat and the trap bar deadlift have been so superior is because when we got into resistance training, weight training, especially for performance and athletics, majority of these things were done for the actual sport, meaning they were performing deadlifts for the actual weightlifting event. They were performing back squats for actual weightlifting and powerlifting. And from that, we've essentially created all these parameters based off those lifts. And actually, when you start to look at it, the walking lunge more resembles what an actual athlete is performing through space on an actual field or court over than just that bilateral. Now, it's not to say that I don't still utilize back squat and trap bar deadlift, conventional deadlift in all of my programs. It's just saying I'm basically raising the question for you to reconsider what is the actual best compound lift for an actual athlete. Now our work actually becomes being able to determine a standard with that walking lunge that's going to transfer over to show that that athlete expresses enough absolute strength to essentially do all the other things. So I hope that helps, guys. Just wanted to put that out there. As I evolve as a coach, I want to be able to put all the information that I'm learning out there with you. I'm open for all your guys' thoughts and comments down below, and I would like to just work through it as long as we're all getting better in the performance community. And I'll holler at you guys next time.